One thing that we're really pushing for, and that the funds will go to, is more of our temperature, humidity control, and all that kind of stuff around the museum here. So we just ordered new ink for our hobo detectors, and those aren't real cheap, which is too bad. But our next brown bag was going to be the first Friday of May, and I'm excited to have back Jeff Barnes. Talking about George Custer and Dakota Territory. If you remember, Jeff was here, I think it was early last year.
Yeah, for the forts.
And he talked about the military forts of Dakota Territory, and that was a really popular discussion too. And he's got a new book out about George Custer, so good time to bring him back. He can talk about his findings, and it's always interesting to learn more and more about Custer and Dakota Territory. So he will be here, and that is sponsored by the South Dakota Humanities Council. So I'm really excited to have another humanities project here at the museum. And then in June we'll look forward to the history of the Czech Days celebration, why they do what they do, and where those customs came from. So I'm really excited about that one too. I did send out an email reminder to our current members this morning about the brown bag. So if you did not get an email, you want to get email reminders of our events, but you did not get it, that's because I don't have maybe a current address, email address for you, so definitely let me know if you want to be on that email list. Okay. I think that's about all I've got. I'm going to let Taylor fill in for you his background and how he came about this whole subject of Captain Nelson Miner. So let's welcome him, please.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. When Crystal contacted me about this, I was really excited. I'm actually a history teacher, so I don't really get to talk about this certain topic a lot because my kids don't care. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic. But first and foremost, I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. Is everyone all right now?
Is your battery pack on?
Ooh.
Getting real personal here.
Yeah.
Okay, try now.
Okay.
Oh, it might be a
There.
little high here. Okay.
You're good? Okay. I'm going to turn on my recorder real quick so I can listen to my beautiful voice later on. Technology.
Kelly's tweeting now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Real quick, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, where I come from, how I got into the topic. Again, my name's Taylor Hamlin. I'm a fourth-year University of South Dakota student. I currently have all my history credits, so I do have a bachelor's degree in history. Right now I'm still in school to get my Spanish degree and my education degree, so I can continue teaching my children. I'm going to be student teaching a little bit more in the fall, and then I'll be going to Spain in the spring to study military history, which I'll be getting my master's degree in. And part of this is when I went into military history is kind of why I really got interested in this topic. On top of Captain Nelson Miner is actually one of my relatives, one of my very distant relatives. My mother married into the Miner family, so that's how I kind of got associated with the topic. Is my father told me stories, my grandfather told me a lot of stories, and when I got into college, they said write a history paper on something in South Dakota. I thought, why not Captain Nelson Miner? The first thing I found is I knew nothing. The few stories that I heard just did not even come close to what I really. It is amazing how much I did find. Unfortunately, I can only bring 5 of the books that I did find on this topic. There's many. I also have my paper that I've written, which also has the sources, which I will share with everyone. Another technology fun. My computer died, so I couldn't show anyone pictures. However, if you guys have any emails or contacts, I would love to get them because I would love to share these things with you. Also, I'm just going to talk to Crystal after this presentation and see if I can get some photos here. So if you guys do not have emails, you can come back and look at them later. But I'm going to move on to the presentation. So, is anyone familiar with Captain Nelson Miner or the 1st Dakota Cavalry? A little bit? Okay. when this all started, this is during the Civil War, during pre-Civil War Dakota Territory. No federal units or federal military units except for some of the Iowa units that were here, stationed here, over at not Fort Randall, but Fort Sully over out west. That was the only federal units here. Everything else was volunteers. When the Civil War broke out, all federal units had to be pulled. So South Dakota was left completely unguarded. As you know, this is during the times of the Great Plains Wars. The hostilities were high. People left Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls was completely evacuated. The largest South Dakota city that we had in the territory was completely abandoned because of attacks. Thus, men basically decided we must protect ourselves. So the Dakota Cavalry was formed, not as a federal unit, but as a volunteer group. They came to Yankton, they signed up. There's about 96 men who signed up. The USD the archives actually has the original company roster. I've seen all the names. There are 96 men. First one, Captain Nelson Miner. Captain Preston Miner, he was actually one of the first, he's either one of the first, if not the first, resident of Vermillion, South Dakota. He came in, he settled, and this is my grandfather's stories versus historical fact. He says he's the first. Historical fact kind of says maybe not. You might know how that
Tell
goes.
us Grandpa's stories.
Grandpa's stories, yeah. Anyway, when he came in, he started a hotel. It was the Miner Hotel, which was he left it to join the military units. The sources that we do have, which we get most of our information from, are Sergeant Abram English. That's the best that we have. He has all the journals, it's well documented. It went from the mustering of the Dakota Cavalry, the training out west, and all the way up into the battles, which actually happened all in present-day North Dakota. Some other sources that we do have, let's see. Charles Springer, soldiering in Sioux County, 1865. This is actually more of a Yankton perspective. It does have Captain Nelson Miner in it. However, these are Yankton soldiers who saw this, so this is more of an outside perspective from the cavalry. We have Soldiering in Dakota Among the Indians. This is actually a paper written, this is Private Frank Myers, who was in Company B, 6th Iowa Cavalry. So again, an outside source. However, Company B Iowa Cavalry went with the Sully campaigns with Miner. The Sully campaigns were the large stage battles that happened up in North Dakota, which the 1st Dakota Cavalry participated in. We have Dakota War, the United States Army versus the Sioux, 1862-1865, Michael Clodfelter. This actually is a perspective for Vermillionites, however you say that. It's actually one of the best sources I did find. I truly enjoy this. It's generic, however, it's well documented. There's a lot of index, there's a lot of sources that you can pull from. Sioux Uprising of 1862, Yankton source once again. Let's see this is from real quick. Kenneth Carlin. This is actually the Minnesota Historical Society. I apologize. So this is Minnesota perspective. Some may ask why was Minnesota? Why would there be a Minnesota perspective? This is actually the Minnesota Scare was actually what caused the Sioux Uprising, or the Sioux Falls abandonment and the Sioux Indian Uprising. So there's a lot of actual history from Minnesota. And the last source I have is actually a grad thesis that I found. This was written in 1956 by an Orland A. Rothsberger. As far as a source, I can't really credit his work because he's only a grad student. However, the index and sources that he has are quite phenomenal. So, these will be up to grab once we're all done. So we'll continue on with after the mustering. They trained for 2 years. There was not a lot of action, pretty much. What the main duty was patrol. They did patrol. And they were the only ones who patrolled. And you can imagine the area from Sioux Falls to Vermillion, roughly all the way out to Mitchell. That was their area of expertise. That's where they ruled. That's where they moved around. And it's, I mean, in a car today, Mitchell's what, 4 hours away, I think, something like that. Maybe a little. 2. Oh God, I'm thinking wrong city. 2 hours away. I'm sorry. It's 2 hours away in the car. However, 100 men on horseback. That was the line of defense. That was who guarded basically all of Dakota Territory the entire time for 2 years. And that's all they did. And in the winters, they came back to Vermillion. The first 2 years, some of the things that they did that was accredited was they actually built the first schoolhouse, first elementary schoolhouse in South Dakota. It was a log schoolhouse out near Vermilion River. It's been long destroyed. There's actually a Vermilion Society who rebuilt it. I think it's getting near its 50th anniversary. If you guys know that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's getting pretty close to 50. But that was one of the small things they did. It was a very big community-based organization. But we're going to kind of move past that, and I'm going to talk about the, meat and potatoes of the organization. General Sully, he came into the Dakota Territory, accomplished general, many battles before Civil War I, accredited, and actually very surprising, he did not participate in the Civil War. However, he was okay with coming out here. He had no qualms about it. When he came out here, one of the first things he did was 1st Dakota Cavalry. He inducted them into his units, and they actually expanded the 1st Dakota into 2 units. It was 1st Dakota A and then B, so it actually became a battalion. Captain Nelson Minor was still made captain. He was the CEO of the entire unit. Generally, he would be more of a major or colonel, but because of the Dakota Territory during the Civil War, they didn't promote him to anything else, so he remained Captain Nelson Minor. The first thing they did was they basically head out north. The Yankton Indians were longtime allies of Dakota Territory pioneers and frontiersmen. They came out, they scouted for a long time, and the main goal was to find any hostile groups or braves. When they went out west, they actually couldn't find anyone, couldn't find anything. They kept looking. They camped, they made roads, and this is actually one of the first times anyone ever saw the Black Hills or the Badlands. One of my favorite quotes actually from General Sully is, when he first gazed upon the Badlands was, the Badlands looks like, we went to the Badlands, it looks like hell without the fire, with the fire turned off. One of my favorite quotes from all time from General Sully. And it is true, in more of a sense than we see. We see the visual aspects, but we still have paved roads. You had to imagine the work they had to do to move across the Badlands. Not only that, into hostile territory. That was the challenge that was presented to them, and they met it. It was hard. They lost many men, not due to assault, not due to battle, but to the fact that there was the middle of the summer, it was over 100 degrees, and they were in a barren wasteland. There was no grass. Many horses died, many cattle died. Many just got let go because they let them go. Once they reached about halfway into the Badlands, and they moved up north, which again is today present North Dakota, they began to see signs of the Sioux Indians. They were collecting. Lakota, Sioux, they were all beginning to collect, which they knew they were coming up from a battle. One of the first battles, I believe, is the Battle of Killdeer Mountain. Killdeer Mountain again, all these battles are up in North Dakota. Very small mountain, and I wish I had illustrations of it. We see about, I want to say I'm losing the word in my head right now, but 300 basically huts which Sioux Indians stayed in, and these are warrior Indians, 4 to each hut. There's about 300 huts, so if you do the math, it's about 1,200, opponents. And we're talking, Sully's units, we're talking, small. You have about 200 men of cavalry, and then he has battalions, which were roughly, I think he had 2 battalions of regular infantry, Iowa 6th, and then in Minnesota, 32nd, I believe. We're talking 600 men each. So roughly about the same size. However, they did not know the lands. They had no idea what they were getting into. And they were beat, they were down. They were traveling over the Badlands until this moment. So they get there, they find, they send out Yankton scouts, and they see this plateau on top of the mountain. They see these huts, they run back down, they tell what's going on, they get into battle formations. The 6th Iowa takes the lead. They are the vanguard. They spread out evenly, and the cavalry actually was held back in reserve with the artillery piece. And forgive me, I can't remember the artillery piece's names right now. When this all happened, they basically took it by surprise. If you did not know, Native American back then, one of their favorite tactics was mostly shock. They wanted to run up, shock you, run back, and then keep on doing that again until you tired yourself out. There was no formal battle here. And that's what they did the entire time. They did that, but however, there was one piece that they didn't realize, the artillery. Artillery kept them back long enough for them to basically get scared off. They didn't understand artillery. They didn't know what it was. but they figured it out very quickly. They actually made an assault on it. They figured out what was devastating them. Made an assault, and this is when the cavalry actually saved the day. The cavalry was in reserve, swept in, and took their opponents out. They chased them all the way. However, there was another hill right next to Killdeer Mountain, which the cavalry took. And this is the unit that Sergeant English was the one who, Sergeant English took this hill with, I think, 30, 40 men. And their job basically was to hold that line because there's a nice little gap that the Indians could use to sweep in and take Killdeer Mountain. Sergeant English actually was surrounded. He, in his journal, he quotes a lot that he thought that was like, he said it was closest moment to death. They thought they were done for. It wasn't looking good. However, Captain Nelson Miner and the rest of the Dakota Cavalry swept in and pretty much took them all out, or pushed them back. And the reason why, and there's a lot of speculation why the Dakota Cavalry was so aggressive, or they were so well, you know, because the Native American, you gotta think about the times of the weaponry back at the times. The times were revolver versus bow and arrow. Revolver, 6 shots, roughly. And sometimes they failed, especially the French carbines that were actually issued to all soldiers in 1862. And well-trained Native American arrowmen could actually shoot about 20 shots off horseback, 1 minute.
Wow.
A cavalryman could shoot about 6. So just do the math. I mean, cavalry shot, yeah, a little more effective. However, couldn't get off as more. How did they figure out how to beat this though? They carry about 6 or 7 revolvers on them. So you had a cavalryman lined with revolvers, and that's how they battled. And actually, the French carbine was completely replaced by Colt, fortunately, because another actually favorite quote from Abram English is saying that the French carbine, you were more likely to shoot your own man than to shoot the enemy. They were completely disgusting weapons. It was pitiful. They were also considered dragoons, which a dragoon is actually a cavalryman who also fights off the horse. Another reason why they were so effective, they didn't completely depend on their horses. These are the main reasons why. Also, a very big characteristic, and if you ever read anything about 1st Dakota Cavalry, you'll hear this over and over and over again. They were known to charge head first, right straight into the enemy. And I've made speculations, I have theses which I will share, but so far I have found no reason why Captain Nelson Miner came up with this strategy, other than sheer just, let's shotgun them and awe them. My theories, it was the plains. There was no sneaking around, there was no flanking. You could if you tried, but really it was a battle of numbers. If they had 150 and you had 100, you're going to lose, because they could spread wider than you. And I think that the imagery of a cavalryman, the fear of a cavalryman, I think Captain Nelson may have known that, and so he would always charge. Sully made many quotes actually saying, "Do not do this," basically. I won't get into quotes, but he criticized him. And General Sully thought very highly of Captain Nelson Miner, but he was highly criticized for this, and he worked every single time. And again, can't figure out why he does this. It's one of the mysteries that I hope to figure out one day, but right now it's one of the big things I do, or I try to figure out. But that was basically their tactic, shock and awe. And it worked many times. So I mean, the Battle of Killdeer Mountain was won actually. Going back into the battle, they were the Indians were actually completely wiped out. If you guys did not know, actually Native Americans, when they go into war, the warriors actually, their entire tribes follow them. So women, children, animals, everyone follows them. This is actually a key to victory, because when they chased the opponents away, they left all of their everything. They left goods, they left homes, they left everything. There's actually evidence, and they talk about this in the some of the military journals. They shot roughly 1,000 dogs.
Wow.
Just Indian dogs. They shot them dead, just to get rid of them. They burned teepees. They burned food because they couldn't keep it. They ate what they could and then burned the rest. And really, the Battle of Killdeer Mountain was a downhill turn for the Lakota and Sioux group, or the uprising. They chased them all the way into the Badlands. The Battle of Killdeer Mountain is actually the only real. There's more battles, but it's the battle with a name. The rest of the battles are known as the Battle of the Badlands, or the Battles of the Badlands. There's just a succession of engagements that were very small, but each time they kept on pushing north or northwest up into the river. And basically, that's where they resupplied and they turned around because winter was coming and the Lakota and Sioux couldn't do it anymore. So just some stories also of Captain Nelson Miner and the group. They're actually during the walks to the Badlands, there was a captain. He was actually a surveyor. He wasn't a fighter in any means. He just wanted to survey. General Sully told him many times, "Stay put. Don't get too far. You know, we're in Badlands, or not we're not in the Badlands, but we're in enemy territory." He didn't listen. He ran off. He went to the river to survey. Took some men with him. They were actually ambushed by a few Native Americans, and he was shot dead. The two men rushed his body back. General Sully sent Captain Nelson Minor and the cavalry to chase after the band of Indians. And once they did, they actually found that there's only three Lakota who actually were the ones who ambushed, and there's about roughly 20 cavalrymen who went after them. They couldn't catch up with them actually, so they chased after them. They told Captain Nelson in order to break rank. They had to rest for a while. General Sully actually sent a messenger man to say, "Pull back. Don't get too foolhardy. Don't rush in." This is one of the famous moments where Sully's kind of complaining about Minor and his tactics. Minor actually ignored it. It wasn't a order. It was a suggestion. So he kept on going. They broke rank. They raced after him. A few men made it. Sergeant English and Captain Minor were actually two of the men. There was two more. I can't remember their names right now. But there's 4 men who actually made it to a little bluff that the Native American ambush group made to. And this is actually kind of where fantasy takes over. This is the stories that I grew up with. They actually found the Indians, and they actually had a small engagement. All 3 Native Americans were killed in the action. They brought them back, and this is one of the more brutal parts of war. And the story that I heard was General Sully ordered their heads to be cut off and put on pikes to warn the rest, which really sparked. This is actually kind of what sparked the Lakota and Sioux uprising. Not the uprising, but bands to come together. They haven't come together in years. Once this happened, Minor they did what they were told. They did it. My grandfather swears up and down that when Minor brought the heads back, he rolled them into Sully's tent, and Sully apparently puked. Again, that's where fantasy takes over. I haven't seen anything like that, but that's just one of his stories. But there is proof that this incident did happen. And from that, after Killdeer on to that point, it was just the battles of the Badlands, just small engagements. Like I said earlier, the roads that were being built in the Badlands, as if you've seen the Badlands can actually imagine, was very rough. They were not moving quickly at all. They were suffering, but so were the Native Americans, because all their supplies were destroyed. So it was just a small ambush. That was it, and they kept on moving, until finally there was just no more uprising to fight them. It was over. And that was pretty much that was the Dakota War for Captain Nelson Minor and the Dakota Cavalry. They were mustered in 1861 under the agreement that they were supposed to serve 3 years or until the duration of the war. And actually, coincidentally, the duration of the war ended at the same time that their service ended. Company B, they still stayed on. They went out, they protected Fort Sully, which was built out in the Badlands. And nothing really exciting happened with them. Captain Nelson Minor came back. He built a life in Vermilion. He donated land actually to one of the first schoolhouses. Not the first schoolhouse, but one of the actually brick houses that was built for the school. He donated that land. My grandfather actually thought he donated land to USD, but I found that's not true, but I'm not going to tell him because he likes the stories. He continued to have a hotel. We have a lot of artifacts, and I'm really sorry. I wish I could have brought those photos. We have a lot of stuff from the hotel. We have USD actually has medals from Captain Nelson. They actually have his captain stripes. We also have the original muster roster. We have a lot of photos. Grace Beatty, she worked for University of South Dakota. She was actually the great-granddaughter or the granddaughter of Captain Nelson. I wish I could remember right now, but so we actually have a lot of heritage at USD, and she really helped out because her donation to the school, the archives, really helps. Now I wanted to keep this brief because I know we were going to leave time for questions. I know we wanted to end around 1, so I can answer any questions that you guys may have. I know it's a very brief thing, but I can keep on talking. I don't want to bore people. Sir.
Good. Do you have any information or any sources of information about Judge Kidder, who was associated with Vermilion during Captain Minor's time? Jefferson P. Kidder?
I don't believe it was Vermilion, because I know there was a judge in Yankton. I'm not sure if it was, I doubt it was Kidder, if it was Vermillion. I know there was a judge in Yankton that they actually, Company A, Dakota Cavalry, was called into Yankton to settle a dispute over the governor's, Governor Jane, his decision. He actually called them in because the legislator was not like buying what he was selling basically. They were actually willing to boot him out. He called in the cavalry to basically qualm the angry masses, which the legislature didn't really take kindly to. So that's the only judge I really know of that was associated with Minor. I don't really think, I can't remember Kidder's name off the top of my head, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
You said that Vermillion had the first school in Dakota Territory.
Am I wrong?
Yes.
Oh,
The little community of Bonham actually had the first school.
okay.
It only lasted one term, and then things had changed. But it's still, and there's a monument to mark where that community had been, not the actual location of the school. But yes, Vermillion is second in that regard.
Yeah, I'm learning things today too. That was like a more hands.
A little bit on the school, the first school is Fort Randall. And then the second school was Bonham. And the third school was Vermillion. But there's one of the Dakota Cab guys played a big role in this. It was John Tallman, and he'd been discharged from Fort Randall, and he went and helped build the school at Bonham, and then he joined the Cab, and he helped build the school in Vermillion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do know one of the first cavalrymen, just a regular private, he actually stayed in Vermillion. Like, they only fought during the spring and summer just because of the, as you all know, the South Dakota winter. Yay! That's the only time they could actually maneuver, and one of the Dakota cavalrymen actually stayed and taught. Just a regular private. So he stayed during the winters and the fall and the early spring to teach at the school. The third school in South Dakota. Or second, we're not sure yet.
There's some question about another school on the 1860 Missouri River Survey map. There's a drawing of a log building with a rail fence around it, and underneath it, it has the name Hanson School, 1860.
Okay.
So I don't know how that fits into about that.
Yes, sir.
What was
I
mentioned,
was trying to ask, I was wondering how much of a settlement there was, people living in the Vermillion area. I know in Yankton, there was a small settlement here, and enough to build a stockade, for example.
Yep.
And I also heard there was some kind of a stockade in Sioux Falls. I was just kind of wondering, what was it, Vermillion? Did they have enough people to have another stockade, or
I think
or
Vermillion.
was it Yankton when they had trouble? What they do?
Vermillion actually did not have a stockade. I think they were fortunate because of the geography of the of Vermillion. So, you know, Yankton's more out west than Vermillion is, and Sioux Falls out more north. These are the problem areas. Once you got to the southeast tip of South Dakota, where Vermillion is located, there is no evidence of hostility. There was never a stockade. In fact, one of the stories, again, from Captain Nelson Minor, during the Yankton stockade, when they were worried, they actually called for Nelson Minor, because Vermillion was having no trouble. So actually, Dakota Cavalry, during early spring, I believe, of 1862, came over to Yankton, and actually, they were almost shot, because they thought that they were the enemy. So they rode in the middle of the night. They came over to help defend the Yankton stockade, which you mentioned. But no, there's no evidence of a Vermillion stockade or any issues in Vermillion. Ma'am?
You're referring to a mountain or whatever out in the Badlands. What is that name? I couldn't quite catch
The
it.
Killdeer Mountain?
Killdeer?
Killdeer. It's actually a Lakota term. We translate it to killdeer. Another translation is the place where they kill deer, or the bird killdeer. We're not 100% sure, but
Is this in the Badlands?
it's up in North Dakota. Yeah, it would be considered the Badlands, or part of the Badlands.
As far as North Dakota, or is it still in South Dakota?
It's in North Dakota. All the engagements that Captain Nelson Minor and General Sully had, as far as the campaign, were all in North Dakota.
Taylor, could
Yes.
you spend just a little bit more time, if you've done a lot of research about what Captain Minor did And his private life?
His private- oh, yeah, of course.
Military life?
Captain Nelson Miner actually was born in Huron, Ohio. Not, again, actually, for a while I thought maybe Huron, Ohio was related to Huron, South Dakota. Because Charles Miner, actually, his son moved up there, but that's not at all. So, just happy coincidence. He moved out to Huron, Ohio. He was actually a lawyer for a long time. It was never any big cases, but he was actually in the local area. He was renowned for his honesty and, you know, helping out the common man. He traveled. He was actually a part of a gold mining group out west for a while, and then he came down. And here's another folk tale. Apparently, he was in the Caribbean sailing around after he was done mining out west, and his boat sank. And apparently lost all their gold.
Oh.
From what I'm told from my grandfather, so take it with a grain of salt. And apparently he swam back, so with some in his pocket, and that's all he had left. But that was that. This is all before he got into Vermilion. When he came into Vermilion, he settled down. I mentioned earlier, started a hotel business. He had 6 children. The most prominent one that some of you might know is Charles Miner. Charles Miner was just a big. He's really renowned in Vermilion history. He owned a farm. During the flood, however, of Vermilion that actually washed away all of downtown Vermilion, Charles Miner and his mother and all their family moved to Huron, South Dakota, which is where they started to settle down, and the miners still have land out there from their original heritage. After the war, he ran Vermilion. He helped out as much as he could. Like I said, he donated land to the schoolhouse, the elementary schoolhouse which was built. He ran a hotel. He was also kind of not a carpenter, I guess a handyman, I would say. And actually, unfortunately, that's how he passed away. Was he was working on some kind of cooling and heating system of some sort, and he got infected by some kind of gas. He died early. He was only like 51, 52 years old when he passed away. He got infected. They put him to bed. The doctors couldn't do anything, and he passed away. I do have I use the obituary as part of it. The obituary was all over South Dakota newspapers actually. I had newsreels from some of the first papers in Yankton and Vermilion. Both played their obituaries. I know the current governor, I wish I remember his name, the current governor of that time came out to Vermilion to witness the burial and whatnot. So, no man. Other personal life, it's very vague actually. Before the war, we know he was a lawyer. We know he was a gold miner at some time, and eventually and I really can't find a reason why he moved out to South Dakota. Typical frontiersmen and pioneersmen were men who, as my teachers put it, can't make it out east, so they gamble out west. I can't really find evidence that Miner was any that kind of man. He had an education, he went to college, he graduated, he had a degree. So right now, I guess he just it was just an urge that he wanted to do it, and he did.
Is Miner County namesake?
Yes, sir.
In that family?
It's actually a shared name with Captain Nelson Miner and Charles Miner.
Would you want to expand a little bit on Nelson Miner's escapade with Temaza?
I'm not familiar with Temaza. Maybe you could enlighten me.
Or do you want me to talk about it? Or?
Sure,
Yeah. Maybe you'll jog my memory.
Well, a lot of the guys were sent up to Fort Thompson to build that.
Okay.
And that was the reposing spot for the Santees that was Naughty in Minnesota.
Okay.
And one of the people there was Temaza. I won't tell you what it means in Sioux, but you can maybe guess. But everybody at Fort Thompson agreed that Temaza's wife was the most beautiful woman that any man had ever seen. And in the close confines of that place, while all the other men were rubbing on her and jumping on her and all kinds of stuff, and it made Temaza jealous. So he took a butcher knife and cut her face up to make her ugly. And the men and the elders in the Santee tribe, they wanted Nelson Miner to shoot Temaza for for what he did. And he said his orders were that he could not touch a single Santee, do anything bad to them, or kill them or anything. That was his orders. So they got together and they decided they was going to have the 15-year-old brother of this injured woman execute Temaza. So they all went up on the hill east there, and the dry ravine is still there. And they give the 15-year-old boy a musket, and they said that he was shaking like a leaf. And he didn't aim very good, and the bullet went through the abdomen and took a big chunk of intestine out, was hanging down. And they didn't know it, but Temaza had a knife up his sleeve, and he started for the crowd and stabbing and cutting and everything. And Nelson Minor was in the back of the crowd on his horse, and he sunk the spurs in his horse and drove through the crowd, drew his revolver, and shot Temaza.
Not heard the story. That kind of does jog my memory a little bit of one other story. Everyone knows the University of South Dakota, they were the Coyotes. Captain Nelson Minor, his unit actually was the original Coyotes. There's a book called First Dakota Cavalry, The First Coyotes, which I also use in my paper. And the way this actually happened was, there's actually a couple of stories. One story is the Native Americans actually nicknamed them the Coyotes because they acted like coyotes. They lived on the prairie, they were fast, they were ambitious, they never relented. So that's one story. What we have in the books is there was a colonel from the Iowa infantry who kind of got cocky. He actually thought that their cavalry horses were faster than the First Dakota cavalry's horses. So they had a little race. It wasn't Captain Nelson Minor's horse who raced, I believe it was Abner English's horse who raced, and they raced against the 6 Iowa's horses. First Dakota completely beat them. And upon this victory, the 6th Iowa colonel proclaimed those goddamn Dakota cavalry horses run like coyotes. The name stuck. So when Captain Nelson Minor came back to Vermilion, when they were deciding a mascot, they chose the Coyotes. So.
Good stories.
Yeah, that's all history. We still have time for questions too.
Oh, well. If there are no other questions, let's give him a round of applause. I do have a pad of paper that I'll put back here on the table for email addresses if you want to see the pictures and information that Taylor does have for more information on Minor. And thank you again for coming.
Yep. And I'll share my email too with you guys. I really want to stay in contact with everyone here. I really appreciate everyone coming out. There's over 100 pictures I have. Once I get them out to anyone, please feel free to comment, ask me any questions you want to over email. Presentation was supposed to be a little bit longer because I was going to show you guys some pictures and whatnot. But if you want to, I can show you some resources in the paper. I can show you some resources in the books. If you want to do your own research, I can tell you books that I found in the Yankton Library, the Vermilion Library, and also in the ID Weeks Library at South Dakota.
So, I was going to ask, if we go to Vermilion, where do we see these artifacts?
If you go upstairs in the ID Weeks Library, which is the school library, you'll find the archive department. Once you step in there, all you have to ask is for the beading papers, or the beading boxes. There's 4. I believe the 3rd box has the original muster roster. The 4th box has his medals and the captain's stripes and a few other things. The other 2 boxes have mostly photos from Grace Beatty. So I mean, those are interesting too if you ever want to look at those.
Speedy?
Beatty.
Mr. Hamlin, I have a lot of grandchildren, I'm sure most of us do. Is there any hope for any historians coming up?
Oh, you mean from the school or just?
From the children, from
Of
the,
course
yes.
there is. There's so many of us. Actually, I saw there's a history club at the school. I saw them yesterday. They gave me a pizza. The topic was Russian prison tattoos, which extremely interesting actually. There's roughly about 10 people in that group who meet every week. So yeah, I believe there is hope. There are many grad students. There are many undergrads. The professors actually we just hired a new professor. I can't remember his name. However, he is going to be the new professor on Great Plains history
Oh, boy.
and the local area history.
That's
So,
good.
Are you an athlete?
that's debatable. I play paintball as a sport.
Ah.
I will argue. I will show you photos of me playing tournaments, and I will argue tooth and nail that yes, it is a sport, but some people debate it.
But reason to bring it back when I was going to college, the idea was that the athletes couldn't get through college. They always took history because they always got through. They're all athletes.
That's business now. That's the joke with business classes. That's where all the athletes take is business. That or they're gym teachers. I would love to be a gym teacher. You get to spend a full day playing.
Taylor, you can be around for a while, so people have
Of
more
course,
questions
yeah.
they can ask you.
I'll be here as long as you guys need me to be.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I think. Yeah.
Careful there, Tom.
All right.
Oh, this is great. This is great. We'll see you Sunday.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Oh, okay, you're gonna be there tomorrow?
Yep.
Wait, no. Okay. But yeah.
Think it's still raining out there? Haven't heard any.
Is it still raining?
Excuse me. Back to the office.
I looked at my gauge this morning and I had not quite 3/8.
I have 5 reels microphone.
I think by now I'd be over half age.
I'm actually going
The square of the trees, that's roughly where we are right now.
So you can tell the guy sometime if he wants more information, you can ask Bob.
I will. I will. It's okay for me to give him your contact information? Because I was going to.
But if he wants to, he can cut a hold of me. I don't
Okay, I will.
care. I ain't gonna bother the poor
Have you
guy.
written down any of your stories?
Huh?
Have you written down any of your stories? Oh,
No.
they sound wonderful.
I take good notes, though. When
No,
I
I
hear him
never
talk,
have.
I take good notes.
But I suppose I should, but people wanted me to record them. Because that'd be easier, you know.
Oh, yes.
But I got some kind of a crazy thing wrong with me when I start to talk into that microphone. I get all choked up and nervous and can't talk anymore.
Yeah,
That's
that
called
happens.
It's called stage fright, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy. Where do you live?
Right here in town, or outside of town, you know. Yeah.
Are you going to go up?
Yeah.
It is, isn't it? I know we're back on that.
Yeah.
About talking to
Well, they were a lesson.
Yeah, very well. And you have an audience and they freak out. Is that you?
No, but I watched them before and think, oh, well, I can do that.
But
And then just put them in front of the stage.
Yeah, so that's.
And people, oh,
Very good.
so what's your latest project?
Well, we have a lot of work to do with the museum, of course, but you know, there's always something.
I thought I could hear the rain on the here. Have you compared the marble with the marble and the
Oh, no.
I think it's the same thing. I see it at church, on television now on Sunday morning. And you watch on.
Have you seen what she's had in there?
Yeah, I've seen it. Actually, I've used that actually too. I've either check that out.
She was here. We have
I'm sorry.